Welcome to Dead in the Night. Tonight, we're going to read some terrifying eyewitness sighting reports of strange alien aerial anomalies in Utah. I have been a long-time reader, but had never submitted any information until now. I decided to offer this report because after reading about the manta ray sighted in Provo, Utah, I realized I had experienced something similar when I lived in Lower 2010. I don't know if you or your readers are aware of the old Lower Airport, but it is very close to town, and as a child, I spent countless hours there with my dad. The airport was built in 1943 and consisted of two runways, one that ran east/west and another that ran north-south. During World War II, the United States Army Air Corps used the airport to train B-17 crews. It was abandoned in 1945 and fell into disrepair over the years. In the summer of 2010, I went with my dad to get some pictures of him standing at the threshold of each runway. When we got to the west end of what used to be the north/south runway, we noticed something strange in the air. We initially thought it was a bird, but as I watched it fly overhead, I realized it looked nothing like a regular bird. It was dark and had a wingspan of about 50 feet. The body reminded me of a stingray because it didn't seem to be very aerodynamic. It was not a blimp because it didn't have its shape and wasn't making any noise. If anything, the object was emitting a very low-pitched hum. At first, I thought it might be an early stealth prototype or some drone, but as far as I know, there were no drones in existence that looked like this. I couldn't get a perfect look at it because there was a fence between us and the object, but I could see that it had some head or cockpit at one end. The object moved upward, pivoted to the right, and flew north over the mountains towards the bluff. We watched it until it was out of sight. The whole encounter lasted about 5 minutes. No other accounts were located in this area, but many other flying phenomena were reported in Utah. Also, I want to add that my colleague and I will be investigating Lower this summer to see if we can pick up anything strange. It's been almost 5 years since this happened. I was driving east on the freeway. It was a clear night, and I looked up at the sky to see if any planets could be seen. To my astonishment, I saw a sizable U-shaped object with 3 red spots, which made it stand out from the other clouds around it. The shape of this object was not a normal blimp. I was amazed. It flew silently and at a decent pace back and forth over the interstate for about 15 minutes before disappearing from my sight. So, I have to say that I have never seen anything like this before. Maybe it was a drone. It was shallow, so it had to be huge. I remember another person saw this too, but he did not stop his car even though I did for around 15 minutes. Usually, I don't believe in UFO, but I had to file this report. I hope someone else saw it and can give more information about this sighting. I'll never forget this. In October of 2013, my brother-in-law and I were at my parents' house in Grantsville, a small town about an hour north of Salt Lake City, and we had both gone outside to smoke. We entered the backyard where he showed me this giant flying manta ray that moved slowly over the town's vicinity. I was instantly amazed by what I saw, and we watched it for about 4 to 5 minutes as we talked about what it could be. It was so low at one point I thought it would hit the power lines. It's weird, but neither one of us remembers hearing any sound from it or even thinking to look up where its wings should be. There is a military base not far from the town, and we wondered if maybe it was something they were testing. At any rate, we decided to go back inside because my wife didn't want us smoking in the garage, so we went back inside, but I kept thinking about what I saw. I kept telling myself that there was no way this thing could have been confirmed, but at the same time, I was determined to find out what it could be. I tried Googling manta ray sightings but came up short, so I decided to go back to Google Maps and look at the street view of the town. Eventually, I found a picture that looked exactly like what we saw, but no aircraft were around. I have seen a lot of strange things in the skies lately. I have been trying to think back and remember what I was doing the night before when this thing flew over. But it's tough because my memory has been fading for some reason. I just wanted to share this experience with someone who might help me figure out what it was. I don't think that what we saw was a drone, because it didn't look like one, and the way that thing moved in the sky. It would be tough to steer something like that with remote control. My wife and I were driving through Arizona in May of 2018. We went to Topeka, Arizona. It was night, and we came out of a casino in that town around at 11:30 p.m. I looked to the south-southeast, which is into the Mojave Desert, and saw what appeared to be a large craft flying very low, coming from a different direction than Las Vegas. The elevation where we were was around 5,000 feet above sea level. The ship was flying very low, only about 1,000 feet above the desert floor, but it appeared to be at least 200-300 feet in length. It had rounded wings like a manta ray. There were several red lights on each wing, and they blinked on and off as they flew over our heads toward the southeast. We were both quite startled and amazed at what we had seen. So amazing that my wife, who doesn't believe in UFO or anything like that, got the chills when she saw it. We wondered why this huge craft was flying so low around here. So, we had to investigate what we saw and look up the closest Air Force base about 20 minutes south of that location, and found out it's Luke Air Force Base. We wondered if the Air Force had a secret aircraft they're testing, and this was one of them. We heard from a friend of ours from Page, Arizona, near Lake Powell, that he saw a similar craft flying low over his house on February 8th at 5 a.m. Now, that's a lot of traffic for that time in the morning, and it's a very remote part of the country. We also called Page, Arizona Police Department to see if they had any calls about this sighting, but they didn't have anything either. There are several theories about what these crafts might be. One is that they were refueling pods for the B-2 Spirit stealth bombers. However, as an aircraft mechanic in my former life, I can tell you that those pods wouldn't be able to hold enough fuel for a B-2's flight from Whiteman Air Force Base to Nellis AFB and back to Whiteman without refueling. Another theory is that some testing took place at Luke Air Force Base for this craft, but why would they need to test it over Utah? Why not somewhere more isolated like the Nevada desert? There was no press release or anything about what might be going on there either. My sighting dates back to December of 1996. I was driving home from work at approximately 11:30 p.m., had my radio on, and listened to some Christmas music. This particular night had about 1 inch or 2 of snow on the ground, making it very hard to see out my car window. However, there were no streetlights on in the area, so it was much darker than usual. I noticed something flying very fast out of the corner of my eye, about 20 feet above me. At first, I thought it was an eagle even though they are seldom seen in this area where I live. But as I focused on what this thing was doing, it became apparent that it couldn't be an eagle. It would have been flying way too fast for an eagle, not to mention that it was flying in the direction of Salt Lake City at approximately 1,200 feet above the ground. I continued watching this anomaly until it made a turn and flew out of my sight into the night sky. Then, all I could think to myself was, what the heck was that? I was about 8 years old when I saw my first UFO. My family and I were traveling from Vernal, Utah, to Green River, Wyoming, as we drove through Canyonlands National Park on Highway 191. We encountered a strange-looking vehicle parked on the road's shoulder. The car was approximately 50 feet long, gray in color, and had no windows or windshield. The craft stood on 3 legs like the letter T. About 20 yards away from this fantastic vehicle were 2 beings. They stood about 6 feet tall. They had large heads with large, oval eyes glowing orange. Their skin was a pale, grayish color. The beings had arms that hung down to their knees. They wore some cloth coveralls with no seams. One being was leaning against the vehicle, while the other stood upright looking at us. I was frightened and wanted my dad to drive off, but he just sat there watching them along with us in the car. They stared at us for what seemed like an eternity. My father kept muttering words under his breath. I think he was praying. Finally, the smaller being walked over to our car, and while walking, its eyes never left us while it waved its arms back and forth in front of its body. As the strange-looking creature was looking at us, its eyes were orange, but the eyes would turn bright yellow while waving its arms in front of its body. I cannot say how long we sat out, since time doesn't have meaning when a being from another planet observes you. Finally, my father raised his arm and waved back to them, and they walked over to the large vehicle, and it stood up in 3 sections, raised on 3 legs, turned around in a circle, and took off in a flash. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe for more terrifying stories, eyewitness encounters, and more.